Good morning and welcome to the Fundamentals of English Language and Literature Teaching, which is paper number 10 of semester 3 of MA English Part 2. We are in the middle of Unit 2 that talks about various theories of language learning. And today, in this video, we are going to talk about the socio-linguistic theories of language learning. We started the discussion of the theories of language learning with behaviorism, which believes in stimulus giving rise to response based upon the experiments that are done on dog and amoeba. Cognitivism is the next theory of language learning that puts forward that stimulus definitely gives rise to response, but the human brain in between has got affected by the stimulus, as a result of which each brain reacts in a different way, producing different reactions. Giving absolute importance to cognitivism and human mind and human working of the human brain. As an offshoot of cognitivism, innate language hypothesis and interlanguage hypothesis, along with error analysis and contrastive analysis, have come into existence, each putting forward to different notions of human working of the brain. Then we discussed Stephen Kreshen's theory of second language acquisition with the differentiation between acquisition and learning, which Kreshen calls as acquisition learning hypothesis, then natural order hypothesis, monitor hypothesis, input hypothesis, and the effective filter hypothesis, all forming the Kreshen's theory of second language acquisition that has influenced the language teaching in the later part of the 20th century. The extreme end of the 20th century had seen sociolinguistic theories. And according to this, it believes that language cannot exist in a vacuum because people identify and communicate with each other for definite purposes in a particular society. Sociolinguistics study the relationship between language and society. Sociolinguistics and sociolinguists are interested in explaining why people speak differently in different social contexts, and they are concerned with identifying the social functions of language and the ways it is used to convey the social meaning. Wardour defines a society as any group of people who are drawn together for a certain purpose or purposes. Attempting an equally comprehensive definition of language, Wardour says that it is what the members of a particular society speak. So, there is a close relationship between language and society. They are not dependent. They are dependent upon each other. They are not independent. And the definition of language includes in it a reference to society itself. And hence, sociolinguistic theories are very essential while discussing the theories of language teaching. Communication is considered as a social act in sociolinguistics. Raising social and cultural awareness of the target language leads to successful communication. This awareness is useful to use language appropriately in various social contexts. Delheims has argued that in learning a language, children acquire knowledge of a set of ways in which sentences are used. From a finite experience of speech acts and their interdependence with sociocultural features, they develop a general theory of the speaking appropriate in their community, which they employ like other forms of tacit cultural knowledge, that is competence, in accordance and interpreting social life. Culture is also linked to society and language and can have different meanings depending on how it is viewed. For example, aesthetically, sociologically, semantically, pragmatically, and so on. The relationship between language, society, and culture is central to the field of sociolinguistics. Language, society, and culture are interdependent and seem to function inseparably. This shows the impact of society and culture in learning languages. Sociolinguistics offers the perspective involved in teaching and learning of languages and introduces the relevant literature on second language acquisition. It presents English language teaching in a variety of specific institutional, geographic, and socio-cultural contexts. Since the beginning of language teaching, the emphasis is on linguistic aspects, especially grammar, thereby developing the linguistic competence of the learners. Saussure's Lang and Parole and Chomsky's Competence and Performance aim at the study of language systematically from phonological level to the morphological, syntactic, semantic, and pragmatic levels of language. They focus on studying and achieving competence on pure and abstract forms of language in accurate measures. The emphasis has been on linguistic competence. But in the recent times, the question as to in what ways these abstract forms of language are useful to the learners to meet the social situations is often asked. Those who try to answer the question and accordingly purpose solution are sociolinguists. They aim at communicative competence, that is, the learner should be able to communicate in the society successfully with the language learned in the classroom. They advocate fluency of language along with accuracy as far as grammatical rules of the language are concerned. So the learner must acquire communicative competence along with linguistic competence. They believe that the learner must not be inhibited by his or her errors, but try to master fluency in language slowly by rectifying the errors. The learners must be aware of the multilingual society and its complexity in the society, and hence must be trained in the classroom deliberations. According to Fishman, sociolinguistics is the study of the characteristics of language varieties, the characteristics of their functions, and the characteristics of their speakers, as these three constantly interact, and change one another in their speech community. Sociolinguistics is the study of speech acts. The speech act is the smallest speech repertoire in a society. It stresses the relationship between linguistic form and social meaning in the interpersonal functions of speech. It stresses more on the formal properties of the message, whether an utterance is a declarative or interrogative or imperative, and a speech act is highly directive. Speech acts can always occur in speech events, which means some place in a setting or a scene. It is particular instance when people exchange the speech acts. The speech events occur always in speech situation, which provides a situation for the speech events to occur. For example, a classroom is a speech situation in which the English period is a speech event, and the verbal exchange that takes place in the classroom between the students and the teacher is the speech act. Similarly, is a meeting or a party. The speech act is the most important consideration of language in use that sociolinguists emphasize. Normally, when we talk about the socio-cultural theories, we have to bear in mind the society which is monolingual, that is, speaking only a single language, as one finds in Japan or Korea or China, where they speak only in one language. In Japan, in the Japanese language. In Korea, in Korean language. And in China, in Chinese language. So essentially, they are all monolingual societies speaking only one language among themselves. Over the recent times, we also have the bilingual societies spread because of colonialism. That a society which knows to interact with each other in more than one language or two languages is called bilingual society, and the phenomena is called bilingualism. Say, for example, in most of the British colonies, we would observe their mother tongues being spoken for the exchange of ideas through speech acts and also the use of English, as we find in Africa. So we find their vernacular or the local language for their interaction along with English interaction in the society. Such societies where two languages are used for communication are called bilingual society. And we also have the multilingualism concept where the people in the society can interact with among themselves in more than two languages, as we find in India. Any student who is undergoing the school and college education, according to the Kothari Commission, should learn three languages. The same point has been emphasized in the new policy of education of India in 2020, where the individual will be learning their mother tongue, also the national language called Hindi, and the international official language called English. So, a person in the multilingual society knows more than two languages to interact among themselves. And sociolinguistics is also concerned with all this ethnography of communication, which means the study of language in culture and society and the number of languages that are employed by the speakers to communicate among themselves. It is concerned with who speaks what, to whom, and how. Delheims, an exponent of sociolinguistics, argues that language and speech have a special patterning that is socially determined. There could be dialectal variations within the society. Dialectal variation in language is based upon the region or location, like the Northern English, the Southern English, the received pronunciation, the Welsh English, all are Englishes, but with a slight variation in pronunciation, selection of vocabulary, syntactic expressions, and semantics, thereby communicating with each other. As we could find in India as well, the dialectal differences of Hindi, as is spoken by the people in Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, and various other parts of India. The Hindi that is spoken by the Bengalis in Bengal is slightly different with the mother tongue pull of Bengali language, and the Hindi that is spoken in South India has got a different flavor of Hindi with a South Indian touch, and similarly is a Maharashtrian Hindi and a Gujarati Hindi. All these are Hindis, but with the dialectal variations. So, there could be a dialectal variation in a language, and there also could be a registral variation of a language. Registral variation in language is based on the profession of people, like the medical register, the legal register, the journalese, etc. Depending upon the profession a person occupies, the selection of the vocabulary and the expressions in a particular language would vary. Say, for example, antibiotics, injection, operation theatre, waiting room, medicines, drip, doctor, nurse, ward boy are all English words that are used by the medical register. And similarly, alibi, court, justice, bone, lawyers, solicitors are English words that are employed in the legal register. Criticism, Plato, Aristotle, drama, poetry, sonnet, elegy, prose, biography, autobiography, fiction, short story, 5 acts, poetic style, plot, theme, characters are all English words that are not employed by doctors often or legal practitioners often, but are mostly the English literature teaching register. So, depending upon the profession a particular person is, the registral variation occurs in a language. Apart from the dialectal and the registral variation, language also has got stylistic variation. The stylistic variation of an individual and the idiosyncratic use of the language are very essential for the study in sociolinguistics. Speech style is one of the features of language use. It involves the use of language in the formal situation and the informal contexts. Formal style is used when the speaker pays more attention to how they are speaking, what language patterns they are using, whereas they pay less attention to these factors in the informal style of speaking. Speakers of any language need to know style shifting according to the situation and the interlocutors involved in the communication process. Especially learners in English as second language or English for special contexts, in the ESL contexts, as they are called, English for as second language contexts, need to learn to change their speech style from the informal to the informal contexts. They need to be aware of the potential problems that arise by not shifting the styles of speech according to the situations. We understand this type of stylistic variations a lot when we observe the newly admitted students into the college. They fail to differentiate between the formal and informal ways of expressions, not only in English but also in Marathi. When they speak to the teachers, or when they speak among the students, or when they speak to the family members, it is the same linguistic style that is maintained. But actually, variation is a must. When we talk among ourselves, with our friends, or with our relatives, the style that is employed is informal. Whereas when we talk to the formal situations, to the teachers, to the elders, and to the principal of the college, or to any of the elders in the society, the formal linguistic style is to be employed and the respect level is to be maintained, which normally the newly admitted students forget. And as gradually you enter into the higher education system and you pass through the system, by the time you come down to third year or MA of first year or second year, you tend to understand the difference between the formal style and the informal style of expressions. Picking up this style of expressions is a must when we are learning a language. Diaglossia is the use of the high and low level language. If style is formal and informal levels of language, diaglossia is the use of high and low level language variation depending on the situation, and a person is supposed to know the diaglossic variation as well. For example, the same person uses high level language in meetings, speeches, church deliveries, and classroom deliberations, while he or she uses low language when he is or she is at home or in an informal situation. A person should be in a position to differentiate between the low and the high styles of speech, low and high linguistic variation when you say that you are learning a language. You cannot be using the same style, same diglossic expressions everywhere in the society. The atmosphere of using language is quite simple in a monolingual situation, while in this globalized era, every society is at least bilingual or even multilingual. In India, at least, we are all multilingual who are able to follow more than two languages simultaneously. Such a condition definitely gives rise to the language use, where it is combined use of language, whereupon many codes, by code we mean language, are mixed up when we speak among ourselves. Such condition is what is called as code switching and code mixing. Code mixing is to mix two or more languages by a single person while talking in a situation. For example, when we say the syllabus is quite fine, लेकिन the students may find it difficult क्योंकि some topics are very new, है ना? In this example, you would observe that the entire sentence is uttered in English. But in between, we have used the Hindi words like lekin, kyunki, है ना. These are the Hindi words that we have mixed with another code of English. This is a best example of code mixing. In code shifting, the chunks of language in one code is along with the chunks of language in another code. For example, when we say, why have you come late to the class? आज तो छुट्टी नहीं है. Still you are late. बात क्या है? Where have you been? क्या घर में बोल दूं? Now, this expression is an example of code shifting, where alternative sentences are in different codes of Hindi and English. Multilingual societies often use code mixing and code shifting for ease in communication, comfort, style, and for many other reasons. For sociolinguists, the function of the language is more important than the form. And so they believe that knowing a language is not merely knowing the rules of a language as we learn English language in the schools and college situations. This would only aim at achieving the linguistic competence. But knowing what to say, when to say, whom to say, and how to say are more important in the social contexts than just knowing the rules of the language. Therefore, we are slowly moving towards the communicative competence of Delheims. That is, knowledge of how the system is put to use in the performing of social actions in different kinds. A grammar of forms makes the learner familiar with the grammatical structures and rules designed to show how the systems or the subsystems of a language work. It is helpful for us to only make grammatically acceptable expressions. But a grammar of functions put together grammatical structures of language and how these can be used by a variety of people in a variety of situations for interpersonal and intra institutional communication. Some examples of language functions are inviting people, accepting invitations, declining invitations, asking for information, polite requests, etc. Emphasis is on the functions or the use of the language in society and thereby developing the communicative competence among the learners. Socio-cultural theories have given rise to a number of phenomena like communicative competence of Delheims that we have been discussing, diaglossia of Ferguson, which talks about the high and the low languages that are used in the society, as Ferguson has put it, or as Lebov has put it, as Black English. So it is not only the white English in America, but the black English with their own expressions that are very essential, as we normally find in while reading the American texts, especially the African American texts of Toni Morrison or Alice Walker and others. So black English also has come into existence as equal with the white expressions, and as Fisher puts it, multilingualism and the use of language in the multilingual situations with code mixing and code switching has become a common phenomena in the society today. So when we are learning English, it is not only to the grammatical rules that we have to concentrate on, but how this language is used, the form that is used, the function that is used in various situations have to be given importance according to the socio-cultural theories of language learning. Learning a language enables its speaker to use it for a range of social interactions. However, teaching English in second language contexts is aimed to achieve minimum mastery of vocabulary items, grammar, and to some extent, pronunciation. Hence, an investigation of the relation between language and society leads to a better understanding of the structure of language and functions of language in communication. The language used in the context of social interaction involves why a language is being used in a particular situation and the consequences of such use. Consequently, ESL teachers, English that is taught as a second language teachers, all of us, need to incorporate social dimension of language in other teaching. Along with their normal teaching of the grammatical concepts and linguistic concepts, these sociological concepts are to be borne in mind while the language is taught in their teaching. This implies that teaching of English should not be limited to mere acquisition of content. The materials for teaching English should include not only grammatical features but also contextual descriptions of the speech samples. Teachers can increase both their own and their students' awareness of social factors to understand how language is used than just describing the grammatical structures in isolation. It is Gumpers who holds that whereas linguistic competence covers the speaker's ability to produce grammatically correct sentences, communicative competence describes his ability to select from the totality of grammatically correct expressions available to him forms which appropriately reflect the social norms governing the behavior in specific encounters. So it's very, very essential that we move ahead slowly from the grammar use to the communicative competence and to the development of communication, which gives importance to function more rather than form, which gives importance to fluency rather than accuracy. Accordingly, the communicative competence has given rise to a number of syllabi, like the notional functional syllabus of Wilkins, discourse analysis of Widdowson in 1979. By the early 1980s, a change in the second language pedagogy gave birth to communicative approach, which is a revolution against the traditional approaches. It aims at developing a learner's communicative competence. It is basically having a capacity to use language in a community. According to Richards, Platt, Weber, communicative competence includes knowledge of the grammar and vocabulary of the language, knowledge of the rules of speaking in different situations, knowledge how to use and respond to different types of speech acts, and knowing how to use language appropriately. A communicative methodology would start from communication with exercises, which constituted communication challenges for students. The approaches to the teaching of English language, which aims at developing communicative competence, enables the learners to express the notions and functions. Accordingly, we have the notional and functional syllabus of Wilkins, developed in 1976. Discourse analysis is a new type of syllabus which takes into examples or takes into considerations the examples of the speech acts. And discourse analysis is presented by Widdowson in 1979. Brumfitt in 1980 has come out with the functional syllabus of English, which talks only about some 20 functions which are most commonly done by the language users in the society. These dialogues performing the functions are prescribed in the text and are analyzed and explained and practiced by the students. Slowly, it has given rise to N.S. Prabhu's task based syllabus in 1982, which believes in introducing various tasks to the students in the class. So, it is not prose and poetry or drama and novel that is taught in the classroom situations, but it is different tasks that are given to the students. The performance and the solution of the tasks are to be done by the students. Thereby, they would be thinking the teacher will become not a teacher in the typical sense with a chalk and duster in the hand, but the teacher will become a facilitator, moving about in the class, helping the students to solve the tasks or solve the puzzles or solve the tasks using English language. The job of a teacher is only to see that the students employ the language. The students use the language, that is English in our context, to solve the tasks and puzzles. They can do anything in the classroom, but the only rule is to use English language in the classroom. If all the students are using English language, at least one sentence each in a period of 50 minutes, the purpose of an English teacher or a language teacher is served. And in 365 days, if 365 sentences are used, made by the student, obviously he would be improving the language use. Is the idea to develop communicative competence. So, an English teacher in multilingual classrooms in India needs to consider ad hoc language use. They need to accept creativity of the learners, and hence the standard and rigid form of language could be relaxed and abstracted at the initial stages of teaching. Code mixing and code shifting should always be followed in the initial stages of teaching. But gradually, the shift of paradigm towards using English should be encouraged at higher classes, and as a result, English language skills could as well be sufficiently mastered. English and all other languages in India should coexist peacefully for a better tomorrow. Thus, sociolinguistics has a great impact in English language teaching in India. I hope you have understood this video. Along with this video, we come to the end of the second unit. We started this unit with rigid type of teaching, beginning with behaviorism and aiming at linguistic competence and accuracy of structures. During the discussion touching various hypotheses and theories, we moved ahead and ended this unit by telling that it is communicative competence that is more important. It is fluency of language that is more important. And it is the language use, functions, and various situations that is more important than the only discussion of the linguistic rules in a classroom. An ideal English classroom should be a combination of linguistic competence and also developing communicative competence among the learners. Linguistic competence is important for an individual to develop the rules of the language and produce grammatically acceptable utterances. Communicative competence also is essential for the learners for achieving the social interaction using the language. So, this takes us to the end of Unit 2. Thanks for watching the video and bye for now.